Hi, everyone, and thanks for still being with us at this point in the day. It's my pleasure to introduce a panel today that's going to discuss the value in private and public partnerships and how ultimately we need to really work together to try and solve things and all the situations you guys have discussed and learned about today. And so we're going to start with some data presented by Halleh, who's going to talk a little bit about representation and share some of her research with us. Thank you.
So hi everyone, my name is Halleh Kianfar. I work for Grace Note. I'm a part of a Nielsen company. I'm here to talk today about today about representation in media, what that means from a development standpoint, from a creative standpoint, how the data can be leveraged to make business decisions, to help amplify story making, and ultimately be a guiding light for a lot of the decisions that we are making today. So just to level set with some data, and I'm going to move a little quickly, so please feel free to reach out to me afterwards to discuss any of this further. We are continuing to obviously be more diverse and representative in the US. By 2044, we are going to be a majority minority. At the same time, we continue to hear through and through from a number of panels and surveys that we do for attitudes on representation that people feel underrepresented on screen. So much so that 52% actually wish that they can see more of themselves or other identity groups on the film and TV that they watch. So clearly the need is there and the need is going to continue to grow. But what I'm going to try to provide is, okay, well, what is the data saying? How can I use data to help um, kind of, pitch better green lighting or de-risking process or help implement policy change? All of these things need data to back them up. So first and foremost, it's where are people engaging with content? So if we look at streaming data for 2023, the majority of engagement with the content is streaming, in particular with the Hispanic and Asian American audiences. What I'm going to show you is there is a direct correlation between viewership and engagement and representation. And so not only do we see streaming overall, but in particular with Asian American and Hispanic audiences is where the engagement is really high on streaming. Well, what does representation on streaming look like and how is this data that we even have? So let me take a step back and just talk about one of the products that I oversee is inclusion analytics. And our mission really is to help measure diversity in media so that major companies could first understand where do we stand, how can we measure this and use data for change. And the change we're hoping to see is more inclusivity, more different storylines, more different representation, and new ways to present people and stories on screen. We have a whole editorial D&I team working with a number of advocacy groups that allows us to measure representation of talent on screen. We also have a number of data sets to cover behind the scenes talent, which is also a huge component of the data that you get to see. So if we actually look at the streaming representation data, you would see that females are close to 50%, even though females make 52% of the US population. We're still under indexed in representation in media. Um, what you'll also see is on with the Asian and Hispanic communities, they're actually over indexed or above parity compared to the population estimate. If you take away the Hispanic representation in Spanish language content, that number drops significantly. So yes, we see Hispanic representation, but it's mostly really on Spanish language content. Um, and and it's kind of those nuances that make a difference of how are viewers finding content, engaging with content that they like, and how is it resonating. The goal here is not to tell you, uh, Asian content is for Asian viewers. We see through and through that viewers of all kinds and all backgrounds just want to see different stories and engage with different types of identity groups overall. This isn't a one-to-one analysis. Yes, there's been some progress on the Native American side, but it's very low. Um, on the LGBTQ plus side, we're seeing progress as well, but given that it's such a major component of our community, the representation on screen is actually very low. So it's not just how much talent that we're seeing on screen, but again, it's like the how. So a lot of the storytelling behind it, as well as those involved in creating the content, really becomes an impactful piece of how authentic a story is, how the story is told to begin with. So the perception of identity is a huge component. So what we say, it's not just about representation, but it's responsible representation. And um, our studies continue to show, in particular, across the board, to be honest, no one's really happy or, uh, no one's really over indexing on being thrilled with how their identity group is actually being shown on screen. But in particular, we're seeing that with both those with disabilities and the LGBTQ plus communities are significant in, not, uh, I didn't, not respecting or the accuracy that they see in storytelling. Again, because it could be animated or live action or scripted, non-scripted. It's across the board. So when we take a look at the stories, one of the big data sets that we have as Grace Note is deep metadata around the film and TV. And what that means is we have huge libraries of metadata around subject, theme, tone, settings, scenarios. We have not yet been replaced by AI yet, but we are a big data company that is leveraging this data. Um, and and the purpose really by layering it on with representation is to help bring light to how is representation and how are stories being told. And if we do a deeper dive of female representation on screen, you can see that there's correlations of how white women are being represented versus black women versus Hispanic women. And there are very clear differences in how that is portrayed. The reason why data has become so important is so that you can see how storytelling is done, where the white space opportunities are, or how you can be coming up with new ways to be actually portraying representation that drives engagement to the viewers. So the story behind the scenes of representation is not as great as the story in front of the camera. Females are doing, they're gaining traction and behind the scenes over the years. We've been working very hard. Um, Given though that we are, again, 52% of the US population, the numbers are still low. We're seeing, you know, higher numbers on the showrunner producer side, but given that we're under less than 50% across the board is not great. When we extend this data to both the BIPOC representation and LGBTQ plus, the numbers are shocking. So given that the type, so, the reason why we bring this data to light is for a number of reasons. One, really, people who are seeking authentic stories, clearly the audiences are engaging with storylines that showcase their identity and different storylines, but really having people behind the camera or being, the writers, the showrunners, the producers, or, you know, above and below the line, really makes a difference in how impactful the story is, how authentic it is, and we're not seeing those numbers yet. There is talent out there. One of the product lines that I run that I think some are familiar here with is Studio System. We recently launched our Diversity Spotlight initiative so we can actually bring forward with advocacy group partners, diverse talent, again, above and below the line so that we can help amplify the career paths. In addition, there is some good news. Okay. So again, with the AI panel, we start with bad news and there's good news. The good news is that we are making progress and it's actually good for business. At the end of the day, we all want to be profitable, right? And it's all about the bottom line. So Even in the Oscars, we're seeing progress. The past few years have been significantly better than the decades before. We've had first time feature film screenplay writer Cody Jefferson getting a BIPOC, screenplay, adaptive screenplay win is huge, right? Never before. He was a writer director only on TV. This is huge. So as we continue to have these conversations about how do we de-risk the process, or how much risk do we take, or how do we help those in their like mid careers or transition their careers, there are success stories to be said about this working, and hopefully businesses will um, take more risk. On the other end, if you look at going back to streaming, some of the most top viewed content on streaming in all of 2023 really did also have high levels of representation, whether it was Black, Asian, LGBTQ, disability, etc. We are seeing that there is more talent and representation on screen, and it is driving high engagement. Last but not least, because everybody likes numbers, the advertising world is engaging. And so what that means is there's ad dollars going to diverse owned media, but it doesn't stop there. We're seeing a number of brands looking to invest, and advertisers putting money against where inclusive content exists, whether it's first time female directors, or looking to amplify stories of like, Hispanic audiences. It's happening. So all of that should help fuel and make everyone feel good about actually investing in this. So if anyone has any other questions, I'm going to hand it over to Allison to introduce our wonderful, wonderful panel. Tons of data here. My contacts there. Please feel free to reach out.
Great, thank you so much for that. So I'm going to bring up Rebecca Sun, our moderator today, and our great panel to speak a little bit about their work in this space. Everyone on this panel has engaged in trying to solve for some of these challenges that you just saw. And so it's my pleasure to bring up Rebecca Sun, who is the moderator today. She's a senior editor of diversity and inclusion for the Hollywood Reporter. And she will kick it off and introduce each of the panelists.
Hello. Oh, hot mic. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rebecca Sun, and it is my pleasure to be here today. I think that I did not have the opportunity to attend the rest of the summit. I'm pretty jealous, and I feel like you guys are all just way ahead of me now. So I'm going to try to well, no, I don't think there will be any problem keeping this panel stimulating, because this is a really solutions-oriented panel. You guys have spent the day really setting the ground for the state of things in 2024 in the United States. And now we're going to try to ideate some solutions and let you know what's out there. This panel is focused on public-private partnerships. In other words, really trying to inform you all on what sorts of resources, governmental resources, are available that will help advance your shared goals. I think it's really fitting that this summit is held in this beautiful space in K-Town, the County Department of Economic Opportunity. That's essentially what we're going to talk about. What kinds of economic opportunities can be leveraged. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves, starting with Karla.
Great. Good to meet you all. I'm Karla Sayles, the Deputy Director of the California Film Commission. I've been at the California Film Commission for about 6 months, so I'm still relatively new. Spent the last 7 years at Warner Brothers in government affairs, and actually worked for the county before that. So lots of experience on both sides. Really excited to be here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natalie Robles. I am the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Programming for Group Effort Initiative. We work to create pathways into the entertainment industry for members of underrepresented community through mentorship, job placements, and training. My background is actually not in the entertainment industry. I'm a city planner by training, and I come from the government sector, having worked in the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I know how many resources there are out there, and the commitment that the government sector has to equity and inclusion, and would love to raise awareness about those opportunities for the creative industries.
Good afternoon, everyone. Gustavo Herrera, and I'm the CEO of Arts for LA. Arts for LA is your regional arts and culture advocacy organization, and we are out there advocating for artists, arts organizations, and access to the arts all across LA County. We're a community of about 75,000 arts advocates. We represent about 200 plus arts and culture organizations. Personally, I'm a son of two Salvadoran immigrants, grew up in Section 8 housing here in LA County. And I think about that a lot as we do our policy advocacy work. It's great to be here.
Thanks. And I just also want to note, if you're, if you're paying attention, that Gustavo graciously made the time to be on our panel today because we had a panelist who couldn't make it. So because of that, if you're going to rely on the magazine later to remember who the panelists, please note, his organization, Arts for LA, if you want to refer to it later. Okay, so when I think about government and DEI, the first thing that what's top of mind right now is sort of what seems to be a regression. Decisions that are being made at the federal level, at the judicial level, really rolling back a lot of what seems like a rollback of government support. I'd like to know, for each of you guys, what's your current assessment of this, support at the federal, state, and local levels, depending on your domain, when it comes to inclusion priorities? Go for it.
Sounds good. Well, it's interesting. We're actually just starting our DEI practice. So at the state level, last year, for those who may not be following as closely, Governor Newsom signed an extension to the California Production Tax Credit Program. And as part of that extension, it actually included a DEI component that was really led by the legislature to try to figure out ways to incorporate DEI into the tax credit program. This new extension of the program goes into effect in July 2025 for 5 years, so through June 2030. So we're now in the planning phases of actually bringing this work to life and figuring out what it'll look like for the state to really start to lean in, I think, in a more meaningful way. As part of this new element, it'll require every production in the tax credit program to develop a diversity plan to really, bring thought to how you are putting diversity forward in the work that you're doing. But looking back into the last couple of iterations, I think it's something that's been a long time conversation, and we've been considering how we do this work. Data, I think, as has been a key component of many of the presentations today, is one of the ways that we started, and as part of the 3.0 program that we're now started in July 2020. What a time to start this, but that's the time it started, and goes through next year. We incorporated some data components into the tax credit program. So every project has to submit data related to diversity at the end of the process when they're being audited. And so, additionally, we've also developed, I think, some important programming, started to create our own pathway programs. We, in the 2.0 program, which started in 2015, it was really much more of like a light touch. Like, let's do some light exposure type of programs to give a variety of different folks, partners, a glimpse at what the industry is like. And as part of the 3.0 program that started in 2020, it was like, no, let's actually start to fund some of these career pathway programs, which have really included a variety of great new programs, like working with partners that are in this room, and launching our own production accounting programs, just by way of examples. So I think the state has been constantly thinking about DEI, how we continue to bring people to the table that are doing this work, how we start to serve also as a funder through some of the work. And now with this new element of the program that we're like, deep in the middle of thinking through and rolling out, how are we going to really start to bring this work to life through some of these diversity plans that we can hopefully continue to uplift during a time when we're seeing a lot of contraction?
I'm really happy to learn more about the state level initiatives and commitment to equity and how you're incorporating that into programs and strategies. I have some insights from the federal level and then also from the local level, just based on my own experience. So when I was at the Department of Housing and Urban Development in the Office of Economic Resilience, in the Obama administration, there were a lot of efforts to incentivize diversity, equity, and inclusion and intergovernmental partnerships. And I know that some agencies that you may not think of have really established a commitment to the arts and recognized the arts as a pathway to economic stability, to mental health, to social cohesion, to community resilience. And, you know, I think on our planning call, we talked about the fact that the EPA has an artist in residence program. The DOT did as well.
So it's Department of Transportation,
yes.
Environmental Protection Agency.
Yes, exactly. The National Endowment for the Arts has a number of different programs that are incentivizing placemaking and investment in the arts in underrepresented communities. There are a number of different grant programs that give points for inclusion of historically underrepresented and underserved groups when applying for grant programs. And then at the local level, when I first came to Los Angeles, I worked with the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, and we were working with different municipalities in Southern California to try and instill racial equity action plans and do kind of an internal assessment of how policies and programs may be disproportionately affecting certain communities. And in the years since then, Mayor Garcetti launched the largest guaranteed basic income pilot program in the country. That was a $24 million initiative in 2021. And it also established the Office of Race and Equity in the city of Los Angeles. I know the county is also undertaking similar initiatives too. So there is definitely an explicit commitment to DEI in the government sector. I know there's been some discussion about rollbacks on the corporate side. After 2021, there was an increase of a lot of public commitment to sort of building that out, evaluating internal structures and policies and investment. And perhaps some of that is rolled back, but I do have a lot of faith actually in the government sector that that's very much alive and well at multiple levels of government.
Yeah, and I think from the perspective of Arts for LA, we've been watching the SCOTUS ruling on affirmative action and then the conversations that have followed that. For us, it's concerning what we're seeing, especially on the philanthropic foundation side, where we're seeing some dial back happen in this area, or at least more conversation happening there. We're reading everything that is being published out there about how it might then potentially impact nonprofit organizations. And so we're deeply committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. We're currently running an initiative with many partners in this room that we call the Creative Jobs Collective Impact Initiative. The Department of Economic Opportunity is a part of that. BRIC Foundation is a part of that. LA County Department of Arts and Culture. That effort is focused on pathwaying 10,000 youth and adults from historically underrepresented communities into the creative economy. And so the question that we're asking is, how does that have an impact on initiatives like that? And how do we ultimately prepare the field, especially when thinking about arts and cultural organizations, to push forward these very important initiatives? We recognize that the numbers that were just shared by Nielsen, those numbers carry across not just the screen, but even when you think about the creative workforce here in LA County, 3/5 of our creative workforce in LA County are self-identify as white. Our creative workers in LA County self-identify as white. We're much more diverse demographic. And so I think the representation challenges that we have in the field carry beyond the screen, and we have to be intentional in our solution making.
Yeah, that's first of all, it's very heartening to know, and I think we're all very fortunate to live in California and in places where it is it's a very different story in other states with what's happening in academia and things like that. I wanted to go off of what Gustavo, you just spoke of. What are when we talk about just going beyond the screen, beyond representation, this is the workforce. This is, we're talking about livelihoods here. What are some of the biggest barriers that face folks from historically excluded backgrounds, who are trying to work in arts and entertainment, and how can government or how can public resources sort of be used to address them? So you can feel free to bring up specific initiatives if you want to, but like, let's just make sure we're even identifying the needs first of all.
I'm happy to jump in here, and I'm currently working on a set of recommendations for this initiative, the Seed Creative Jobs Collective Impact Initiative. We're trying to narrow it down to 10 recommendations after nearly a year's worth of conversation with the field. And I think part of what we're seeing is it's important that there are public-private partnerships. The pathways into the creative economy are just not as defined as pathways into the healthcare industry. If you were someone who grew up in Section 8 housing, low income, son of two Salvadoran immigrants, and you don't have access, you don't have a network to tap into the creative industry, it's pretty difficult to figure out how you get there. And so having intentionally designed pathways, ensuring K through 12 is connecting with our community college system, and the employer partnerships are there. All of that is critically important. There's amazing work being done in the AME High Road Training Partnership area. We need to invest in more programs like that because these are intentionally designed programs. And I think fundamentally we need to look at some of the underlying issues. Yes, the diversity, but also the wage issues. The average wage for a creative economy nonprofit employer, now I'm speaking about nonprofits, about $42,000 entry level salary. If you are BIPOC, it's about $33,000 annual salary. Think about the student debt that we all have, add to that the affordability crises that we have all across Los Angeles County and the state. And it's very quick, people are to say, hey, I can't afford to work in the arts, and they move industries. We need to address that as an underlying concern.
But just to add to that, I mean, anecdotally, I think that there's the cultural element on top of that. I mean, I'm first generation. My parents are both immigrants as well. And anytime the idea of arts came up in our house, it was like, well, no, you need to get a job that's going to pay you. And there's only a couple of jobs or only a couple of pathways that are going to do that. And I think that that was, I saw that with friends. I saw that with family members where it was like the moment you want to lean into something that just brings you joy, it's like, there's your family being like, but how are you actually going to afford to live? And so, not to kind of bring in all these other factors, right? But the housing crisis, you have all these different layers that I think are added onto California. And I think, you really hit it, Gustavo, where it's really tough then, not just for anyone, but then you add, the cultural element of families. It's not just in the Latino community. I know my, API friends have the same exact experience. My Black friends have the same exact experience where you almost have this reticence to lean in, even though that's like everything inside of you is like what's telling you to go that way. And so I think that makes it really tough too, because those are the cultural underpinnings that I think sometimes end up deterring folks from even being willing to take the risk in our space.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something I've thought about a lot. And I think that the unifying factor for the why so many of us, our families, historically, it's like a cliche, right? Like, go be a doctor, an engineer. Why is that? It's because immigrant culture, immigrant households coming in don't have generational wealth. And this is arts and entertainment is an industry that requires an enormous sort of underwriting of support, like, the old saw of like, oh yeah, I worked in the mailroom for peanuts. Well, that's because your parents are paying for your rent, right? You can afford to do that. So lack of generational wealth. And also specifically, you want to work in a culture that doesn't represent you. You want to work in a culture where there's not people who look like you who work in there. Of course, that seems like the riskiest thing in the world, right? And then risk, right? Because our parents, or our grandparents underwent enormous risk just to come to this country. And so those are so many factors, right, that face people who are historically excluded. And why I think that when we talk about support, a lot of times it comes, this was something on the planning call you guys talked about, starting with just meeting basic survival needs, right? You know, housing resources and things like that, that kind of frees up the creative bandwidth to make the art. And so,
But I think
yeah.
that that's where some of the government funding really kind of starts to kick in because you might have, a program like, let's take one of our programs that might, help you, or we pay for training as part of our programs. You might then be able to layer that with somebody else's program, another government funding element that might do wraparound type of services. And all of a sudden,
Talk about
suddenly,
what's a wraparound service.
I mean, it's usually used in a different industry, but I'm kind of bringing it into this industry where we're really thinking about what does that person, what does that artist need to be successful? It's not just the direct training. It's not just maybe, access to the job. It's actually being paid for the job. It's actually the mentorship or the soft skills that come along with that. And in this industry in particular, I would say the soft skills are a really big deal, right? Knowing some of the ins and outs that nobody tells you. It's like, well, show up early. It's like, well, what if you showed up on time? Well, you're already late. So some of the things that would, I think, make you stand out, how you go about networking and getting that next job. These are all things that ultimately, they're held back, but you see it as like a gatekeeper is kind of keeping things just because you didn't have a family member or somebody else that kind of gave you the secrets to be successful. And so that's where some of these wraparound services really come into play. And you start to see the possibility of actually layering some of these programs on top of each other to start to be able to see how you can piece together, okay, a person who can go in, take that internship opportunity, get the housing, get the stipend to do the work, get the mentorship along, and then that one person might actually have the tools to be successful. But it's a big lift.
Are there places like are there places or resources that kind of provide a directory or some way of packaging? Like you said, it's a lot of work, which is just a reality that we accept, right? That we don't live in an equitable world. And so it is a lot of labor that, you just have to accept. But where do you even begin to look for these things? I mean, maybe that's something for the workshops to figure out, but go ahead, Natalie.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that because we rely very heavily on the programs that are offered. So we're very grateful for our partnership with the city and the county that subsidizes internships, paid internships for opportunity youth. So those slots are reserved specifically for youth 18 to 24 who are formerly homeless or foster youth, have experience with the justice system. And they, speaking to Holly's presentation, they de-risk any perceptions of risk that the employer may have because they pay 100% of the salary. The American Job Centers of California serves as the employer of record. They also provide insurance for the intern, and those are entry-level positions. That's the foot in the door for communities that may not have that legacy or connection. And it's a set aside of funding that's available every year, every season for specifically for these communities to try and get them these really valuable work experiences. It also provides on the job training, job preparedness before they're even put in their job placement. And then GEI kind of complements that with the wraparound services. We even provide transportation stipends. We can provide funding for equipment and software. All of these things to ensure that someone just starting out in this industry can succeed and move up in their career.
Yeah. And I also think about both folks, workers, creatives who are working as W-2 employees, but then we also have folks who are working as gig employees, and there's different tools and services. The LA County Department of Arts and Culture, and I'm seeing Mia in the room over here, offers incredible tools for folks to build their soft skills, to be career ready. I'm also thinking about Kelly Lobianco's programs with the Department of Economic Opportunity, just in thinking about creative businesses and the kind of supports that folks need to ensure that they can be a successful gig worker, that they're tapping into all the resources that the county has available to them if you are an independent contractor or a small creative business, there's plenty of tools, and those are great partnerships for folks.
I hope everybody is just writing down furiously some of these programs and initiatives because yeah, they might take a little bit of like Googling. And so whenever you can just and Gustavo had mentioned one earlier that went by kind of fast. So I just wanted to make sure you knew what he's talking about, the AME High Road Training Partnership. That's Arts, Media, and Entertainment High Road Training Partnership. It's actually a BRIC Foundation program. They had received a 3-year grant from the California
State, yeah.
from the state, from the California Workforce Development Board. So that is a thing that exists. So one thing that like kind of really strikes me in this as we sort of, move into our final point of discussion here is I think one thing you guys mentioned on the planning call, there's actually a lot more money than you might think available that your tax dollars have funded, that people just don't know, how to tap into it, right? And so, first of all, I'm just curious, which is like, what is in your guys' experience, and including Natalie in your time in the public sector, like, what is the utilization rate when it comes to like people taking advantage, like people from arts and culture taking advantage of these tax dollars that are out there? I think that America, unlike other cultures and other countries, we're not really used to thinking of the idea of like state supported, arts, especially since at the national level, they're at all levels, they're often cut.
Yeah, I would say that they're underutilized for a couple different reasons. I think one is awareness, particularly because, as I mentioned, creative and arts industries, you don't typically think of that as being something that's funded through traditional workforce development programs. I would also say that for smaller nonprofits, even grant writing is a huge lift. It takes a lot to put together the budgets, to meet the requirements, to have the capacity to do the reporting, any limitations on the use of funds, things like that. There are a lot of sort of there's some bureaucracy and red tape involved in utilizing public sector funding. But the one thing I will say is that once you sort of understand the system, and government offices are willing to work with you, answer any questions you may have because they want you to take advantage of the funding. The benefit of having public sector funding is consistency. These are programs that are around, year after year. If it's not a special initiative, these funds have to be committed. And it sort of takes away some of the questions about funding for smaller organizations, because you have, in some cases, multi-year funding commitments, and then you're part of this program. You can continue to apply. You kind of know how it goes. So I think it's just awareness, and then just maybe a little bit of support through the process. Either if it's utilizing a consultant to do grant writing for you, working with a county, city, or state office just on answering questions about how a program works and how to take advantage of funding. It's possible, just a little bit of a hurdle.
And can I just add something here? I think that this is why it's incredibly important that we all, as creatives and as creative workers, are also advocates, because the funding for public funding goes up and down all of the time, and we have to fight tooth and nail to make sure that those resources are there. There's a couple of upcoming opportunities that I just want to put on your radar screen. I don't think I'd be doing my job as an advocate if I didn't share this with you. But on April 9th, we have a meeting with the Board of County Supervisors where we will be sharing a set of recommendations on what the county can do to partner to build 10,000 creative sector jobs that support pathway folks from historically underrepresented communities. There's going to be an opportunity for public comment. There's going to be an opportunity to be part of a small event to celebrate these set of recommendations. Invite you to join for that. Also, on April 17th, there's going to be a state day of advocacy in Sacramento. And that is a great opportunity to take a trip to Sacramento and to get out there, elevate your voices, make sure that folks understand that arts and culture funding is important and it shouldn't be dialed back because it supports all of our all of us within the industry, artists, arts organizations, arts businesses, and so forth. And so just want to encourage you to make some time to do that.
We'll see you in Sacramento. Everybody should go.
But I'm happy to take it even a step further. I mean, honestly, like how many people, just by show of hands, actually know who their representatives are at any level of government? Okay. If you do not know, look them up. Whether it is your city council member in whichever city you live in, your state representative, your member of Congress, you should know who represents you. And you should reach out to that office and share the things that are important for you. If you're involved with initiatives, reach out. They all have folks in the district right where you live that I'm sure are interested in engaging with you and answering your questions about how to tap into some of these resources. At the California Film Commission, that's what we're there for. I mean, the number of questions I get on a daily basis over, how do I do this or how do I do that? It really gives me an opportunity to figure out how to serve and how to continue to promote production, filming, and the industry more broadly in California, because I get the difficult questions. So I encourage you to reach out, give us a chance to help you figure out, how to be a more effective advocate for you all as well.
I heard that, and I'm just going to wrap up with one last clarifying thing. I think during the planning call, one of you guys mentioned that you can even like not only get to know your legislators, but maybe even like invite some local reps. And there's like a guide. Is there some sort of guide online about like how to, like how to go about doing that? Oh.
This QR code will lead you to the guide of how to advocate. This QR code will tell you who your representative is, and this QR code will have you join our group, and we can help make Sacramento a safe, fun experience for you if it's your first time talking to legislators. QR codes.
So thoughtful. Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much. I think that we are out of time. The time actually flew by. Thank you so much for your expertise. I hope we all like take advantage of your tax dollars because they're going somewhere. So, thank you.